Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today, I would like to talk with you about insights for innovation and suggest a little bit provocatively that we give up on big data and on consumer centricity in order to focus more on system and on warm data. So let's have a look and see what this is all about. So first of all, congratulations for making it 92.1% through 2020. It has been a tough year. A lot of things have happened. And maybe the reason for that feeling is that unlike most of the years where only not much happened or not so much, 2020 is really a year where decades have happened. And the reason for that is pretty twofold. On the one side, we see that we have an increase in traditional uncertainties that we have to deal with: consumer value equation, innovation success, supply chain consideration, and really all the things that make a bit of the bread and butter of the work that we do in the business world. But on top of that, we have also seen a big decrease in certainties that we previously had. Really a range of things that we took for granted for a very long time that suddenly become a bit put into question. Around the health system, that's pretty obvious, but also food and access to food, and even political and legal systems, which got challenged with a lot of instability, even in places which were considered extremely stable in the past. Financial system instability, which has been in the wake of the crisis, of the corona crisis, as well as energy system issues with negative prices on oil, and even now questions on availability of energy in the long term. So if we take even a bit more narrow down a field like an industry like aeronautics, who would really have thought that Zoom was going to be the fiercest competitor of companies like Airbus, Boeing, or airline companies? Who would have thought that? And also, how would have we been able to predict that before 2020 actually happened? And even more important, now that we are at the end of the year, will we ever go back, and how would that happen? So if we step back and look at something which is even closer to my field in the home, and look at a bit of a broader time perspective, we see that over 100 years, life at home has seen a lot of profound transformation. What we had in our homes 100 years ago compared to today is really transformed. Refrigerator, washing machine, but also TVs and electricities and computers and so on have become really key into our well-being. And within that, Electrolux has played a role by being relevant and shaping what better living would mean, and things like the fridge, things like the vacuum cleaner, and very relevant to 2020, baking machines for making your bread. So obviously we're in a place where we're asking ourselves now, what about the next 100 years, and what does it take, and where do we go from where we are today? But before we do that, maybe a good starting place to think about the future is actually to take a closer look at the past. You see two pictures here of a vacuum cleaner, so something that at first glance has not evolved very much. But when you look a bit closer at the pictures, you also realize that there's a lot of things around the product itself that has evolved. On the one hand, you see someone who probably is a maid, is a woman, is being paid to clean, who is using the first vacuum cleaner that we ever launched. And on the right-hand side, 100 years later, you see a man who looks like being a dad who is cleaning in his home. So you see a lot of changes. Gender role, being a professional versus doing it while you juggle with a lot of priorities, including taking care of your baby. So there is a lot of things going on around the product that seems to be different. And when we take even a closer look at that first vacuum cleaner and what was going on around the time after the First World War, we have a lot of differences, a lot of things. It's the start of industrial infrastructure. It's the arrival of functionalist architecture. It's rapid urbanization and electrification of the homes. It's the access to new communication across markets, and that helps inventions that have just really appeared to travel and to spread to more markets and be taken on by new inventors. It's the emergence of marketing tools to drive awareness and really make people aware of those new appliances and products. It's also obviously the emerging middle class with gender roles that are still quite segregated, but 8 hours work week and women starting to join the workforce. It's the progress of science with medicine, better understanding of bacteria, of germs, and the role they play in the home, and therefore new rules of hygiene and new norms that starts to spread. It's also door-to-door channels to educate consumers about these new standards of hygiene, because as much as to sell appliance like a vacuum cleaner, because at that time we didn't have any retailers even that existed. So really it had to be people going and knocking at the doors of potential customers to tell them about why a vacuum cleaner was needed. So you see a lot of things at different levels in terms of culture, infrastructure going on, and the vacuum cleaner that we were selling, finding its way at the center of all those dynamics. And if we try to make sense of that and what it can teach us, it's really that innovation and value creation should be looked at as systems, really as a combination of actors and forces that apply at different level and that creates opportunities for companies and for Electrolux and others. And what are really some of the key dimensions of that systems? You see from really the broader sense, those fundamental conditions, that this is all about our relationship to nature, really what's the big demographic trends and the social structure, who is in charge of guaranteeing the well-being of societies, foreign affairs, role of institutions, the church, the state, or companies and brands maybe today. You see also a lot of culture, with the ideals and the imaginary around better living, around food, around health, around cleanliness, and really also the ideals of the family and the household that are going to host those products. And you keep going down and going into much more practical things, business environment. What's the business models? What's the channels? What's the competition going on? You also look at regulation. What are the norms? Who defines them? How are they being defined? Norms around household, around family life, and so on and so forth. And then when you get really to the bottom, there is obviously technology. What are new technologies? How is that changing production? Ways to produce? How is that changing distribution? And last but not least, everyday behavior, really of our consumers. how do they go about their life, their attitudes, their behaviors. Um, and what's interesting is that historically and quite traditionally, insights as a function really focus on the bottom layer, like the consumers. But and there are people, there are functions in organizations looking at the other levels, legal, sales, and so on, R&D, obviously. But what's one of the challenges that they're looked at independently, cultural response, there may be something that marketing looks at in order to build campaign and to make sure that the brand remains relevant. Technology is looked at by R&D to define new options for product improvements. But who looks at transversally what all those levels together mean and how do they interact to create new opportunities, really integrating different aspects. And that's really one, I think, of the big opportunities for insights function is to actually take charge of integrating those dimensions. And so really the belief here is that new opportunities emerge from the changes at each of the level that I really quickly took you through. And these changes are not only defining what are the opportunities, but they define how mature they are the things that are residual, or the things that are really kind of mainstream, or opportunities that are much more emergent and sometimes quite difficult to see or to see as big, but which will grow over time as changing keep unfolding at those different levels of the model. And that will define, these changes will also define how fast the opportunity come to life, come to maturity, and how big they can be. And that's critical because obviously today's values, the kind of center of gravity will move from being very marginally relying on emergent one to really to see those take much more importance in the portfolio in terms of overall revenue. But this is not to say that you should focus only on emerging opportunities, but really have a bit of a balanced view to handle the transition from one to another. When we look back at our history in Electrolux, we realized that there were really 4 transformations, 4 time period with very different dynamics of the system across those different layers. And that really the brands, the products, and the organization that were winning were the ones that were able to be relevant and to make sense of each of the different contexts that we outlined. From the new modern living with people emerging to the cities and starting to define what are scientific standard for and progressive tools like a vacuum cleaner to create a life in the city, to the post-Second World War, really massification and standardization, hand in hands with the nation states in European countries, all the way to the year 2000 and smart individual living and the notion of really individualization and personalization. I won't go too much in detail for confidentiality reasons, but really those different phases creates different opportunities and different requirements in order to be relevant. So obviously, if we come back to our period, we ask ourselves, knowing that and having explored the past, where, what system do we want to be part next and which one should we be part of? And in order to answer that question, we really, it's quite telling to think about system as something that's that people are a bit obsessed, and there are systems we realize around us, all around us. First, you and I, as human, who have a history, a personal history of psychology and sociology attached to us, but also organs and biology. And it's quite interesting to realize even that we are, as human systems that are integrated with the outer world, with cells that actually are not even human in our body, that guarantee our functioning. The biosphere, of course, there's been a lot of research on that, but also turn into popular culture, like the book The Hidden Life of Trees, which really are offering opportunities to understand life as system, for instance, network of communication of trees, interaction with uh, the climate, interaction with the biosphere around them. And last but not least, of the examples that we mentioned, this constrained planet we live on, with system modelization of the limits that we're going to face when we start to plug population, food requirements, availability of growth opportunities, and so on, and realize that that system can quickly go into imbalance. And so how do we make sense of all of those things? This is where really the warm data concept becomes something that can help us and add to something we're more used to, big data and thick data. And really, if you contrast where there is a difference, is this notion of the type of data of what I call warm data, picking on the concept developed by Nora Bateson. It's really to have this mix of quals and quant at different levels, from the very macro to the very micro, the broadest conditions that we live in, all the way to the humans in their homes, in their day-to-day activities. What type of questions we should focus, this goes to this question of interdependencies and condition of change of stability or stabilities in the system. The method is really to identify those networks rather than to focus on algorithm or interpretation, which big data and thick data do respectively. And it's really about defining what's that system that we want to be part. What's the past? As we have seen, the past I gave you a glimpse of can be a really big source of inspiration to understand what are the changes that have happened over time and what could be the changes coming up in the future. And in terms of value theory, big data as a theory of value, which is about optimization, that applies to media, to pricing, to assortment, or to really a lot of fields. Thick data on its side is really concerned with the question of meaning to consumers, and really as part of a culture, how that meaning unfolds. But here I would suggest that warm data brings something on top, which is how do we ensure the continuation of relevance or new relevance as the system that we observe changes, where norm of hygiene evolve, when technology available evolves, to really make sense of those transformations. So three things that I think as insight and analytics teams we can work on to be even more central to organizations in the future. It's about broadening our scope, kind of zooming out from the categories we work on, or even the consumers and the markets, to culture, but also to even broader, moving from this human only to actors, understanding all those actors that make the different layers of the model change. And then embracing the complexity that comes with it. Second, it's to integrate in systems dynamics. So to look at those relationships between actors, explore the imbalance, the tipping points that occur or may occur. And that means for that, exploring a bit of the fringes, things that are weak signals at the different levels, and how they could become more important and accelerate. And in that way, make Zoom become a key competitor of Airbus or Boeing. And last but not least, this notion of becoming a diplomat. In order to, diplomats are really good at having every people talk together and understanding them from their point of view. And this is really what's needed if we are to integrate those different levels, which are normally being really dealt with in-siloed by different functions and different type of priorities, to really look at it transversally and speak a common language or a different language. And that obviously requires a lot of integrative thinking in order to make sense of that complexity and that diversity of point of views. But obviously, whether we talk about thick, big, cold, or warm data, we need to keep in mind that this is only part of the picture, that at the end, the quality of the outcome we deliver is really also dependent on the rate of insight and the quality of insight that we generate from this data, as well as the rate of our action and the quality of our action. And obviously, the changes and the speed at which 2020 required us to adapt is a testimonial to this, this need for speed. Lastly, just to leave you with one thought, and with that question is, what system do you define as the one relevant for you? And which one are you going to be investing your time in? Because we are what we do really as organization, as culture, and as people. And this is a bit of the a good example. Our CEO recently spent a lot of time with the Stockholm Resilience Center, immersing into the climate science. And that time dedicated led us to think ourselves as the first priority for the company, what we call Mission 1, to become a sustainable consumer experience-driven company. And I think that understanding the system we operate in and making sense for, depending the organization, where it comes from, what's the culture, and what's the ambition, is really a good question to ask ourselves for the future. Thank you very much. We have time now for a few Q&As.